Hi, and welcome to Agile Systems and Resilience, changing everything since 1943. So, becoming resilient and anti-fragile, it's really a way of life. And to understand exactly what I mean, first you need to understand what is fragility. So, fragile things are things that don't perform well under stress. Now, unlike fragile things, robust things are things that actually handle stress really well, and they don't deteriorate in terms of their performance. And normally, when we think about things that are fragile and stressed, we think about these two elements. Either you are fragile or you're robust. But there is another part to the spectrum that was identified by Nicholas Nassim Taleb called anti-fragility. And this was made really popular in his book, The Black Swan. And anti-fragility says that there are things which actually do better under stress. They improve. And because of the fact that they improve under stress, we can call those things truly resilient. And that's what we want to go for when it comes to our systems and our designs, because of the fact that things will be stressed and we will experience change. So Agile flips the script on fragility, and it really does this compared to the antithesis of Agile, which is the predictive methods. So I'm going to walk from predictive to Agile and show you how this aligns with the fragility spectrum. So to get started, let's talk about things that are predictive. Things that are predictive really rely on there being no changes. As a result, as stress increases, performance really goes down. It starts high, but then it goes down. And these types of things are the things that we call fragile. And examples of fragile things are a political reputation, because it only takes one gaffe to ruin a career, or one bad photograph, or a cost-efficient system. Cost-efficient systems are things that are so well tuned that they literally can't change even a little bit or they begin to fail, kind of like some of our supply chains during the pandemic. Packed schedules are another thing that are truly fragile. If you have a schedule where every meeting is bookended by another meeting, if one slips, the rest could slip, and then none of your meetings do well. And then lastly, the iPhone SE screen. The iPhone SE is replete over the internet, as well as in the experience of those who had them, that it essentially was constantly spidered and cracked because of the fact that the screen just could not handle even the smallest drop. Now, first generation lean techniques help us to become robust. They allow us to actually manage stress in a normal curve fashion, what looks like an S curve as you see it here. And this kind of S curve actually is similar to what we would experience in terms of a worker's reputation. At the very beginning, you're perfect, but then you're no longer perfect, you're just normal. In fact, you stay normal under enormous amounts of stress until eventually, if you continue to make mistakes, people will give up on you. But you're just like the rest of us if you're not perfect, and frankly, that's kind of what we've all experienced. Examples of systems that perform like this are systems that are redundant. They have backup systems. So when something fails, they can go and they can rely on other parts of the system to work. Examples of how to manage your time this way is with a to-do list. So if I have a list of things to do, even if that list is not necessarily in any priority order, as long as I just start at the top and keep working my way down, I'm going to get a lot of good work done. I would have to experience a lot of stress and basically not get anything done for me to feel unaccomplished. And then if you look at a car, it actually follows this kind of performance in terms of its value. At the very beginning, once you drive it off the lot, it's basically lost a big chunk of its value, and then it's going to continue to decrease a little bit over time, but it's going to hold its value for a while, and then eventually the wheels will fall off, the transmission will need to be replaced, etc. That's kind of what happens at the end. So this is our normal curve for first generation lean. Now, second generation lean looked at the system and said, you know what? If we could reorganize the work that we do, if we could prioritize, we could do better. And so what they offer is essentially what I have termed a buffered system. And a buffered system basically says that you're going to allow for the least important work to be thrown out first so that your most important work is saved until the end in terms of your stress curve. So essentially, Performance goes well for a while, and then eventually the stress overcomes the system. And this is what we see in a hero's reputation. So heroes' reputations are buffered because of the fact that they can get away with anything, even murder. And they can do it many times over until eventually the world gives up on them and says, no, you've done too many bad things. We no longer can hold you as a celebrity. Celebrities eventually do run out of goodwill. Protected systems behave this way. And I'm thinking about systems like a nuclear reactor, where many fail-safes exist, and essentially it will continue to perform, and it can handle a lot of changes and stress. It's designed to do that. Prioritized to-do lists actually perform really well like this. So if you put your most important things at the top of your list, even if you only get to those things, you're going to have a good day. And in terms of systems that we see in everyday life, this is actually very similar to how a hospital works. And in a hospital ICU service, they prioritize which patients to take in first and to fast track. And as a result, they can serve everyone and meet their needs up until the point where their capacity is reached. And that's when service really drops off, which is why in the pandemic, we're trying to flatten the curve. Now, Agile flips the script and says that under stress, we're going to continue to improve performance. And in fact, we like stress because we learn. And so this actually exhibits what we call anti-fragile behavior. And examples of this are like an artist's reputation, where essentially there is no such thing as bad news or bad press. Replicated systems look this way. If you have many replicated, slightly variant options, you can then pick which one performs the best, and that will work for you. In terms of our time management, experimentation actually has this same kind of performance curve. As we experiment, we learn, and as we learn, we now get better over time. So instead of just having a list of to-dos that are prioritized, we should run some experiments and get better at what we do. And then a system that actually performs this way is Roomba. And what's really interesting is that iRobot, the makers of Roomba, actually were in the same lab as Jeff Sutherland when he was working at MIT labs and preparing to become the founder of Scrum. And he was actually informed by their systems, which were all about decentralized control. But the point here is that Roombas are little vacuums that run into walls and figure out the map of your floor. And then they can go and they can vacuum that floor much more efficiently the next time and the next time. They actually store the map of your floor and they can do it better each time. So until parts break. So that's examples of anti-fragility and how we flip the script. So our goal is to become agile. So we want to go for this. I'm going to explain a little bit more about exactly what we mean. So a really great place to start, it's not really the beginning, but it's a really good place to start, is to talk about the Agile Manifesto. Now, the Agile Manifesto was developed by Agilists who were coming together in 2001, and this is about 7 years after the Scrum paper was published by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. At this point, we had a number of iterative methodologies in place, like extreme programming and dynamic system development methodology, as well as Scrum. And these leading practitioners sought each other out, met in Snowbird in 2001, and tried to come up with something they could agree on as being kind of a new code. Now, the thing is that these 17 practitioners didn't really get along completely, and they didn't always agree. And then eventually, like half of them left and went to go ski, and the remainders kind of just decided, you know what, we should write something down. So they got up and they came up with this, and essentially they said, look, I think we all agree that we value the items on the right, but we really value the items on the left more. And so the first thing that they talked about was individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this is really important because of the fact that people are the ones who get the work done, not the processes and tools. And processes and tools can't carry anywhere near the amount of information that you need to convey on projects doing work. So individuals and interactions were more important than processes and tools. However, you need processes and tools in order to discipline yourself and to scale. So that's how they valued those two things. Then they said that working software, and now today we say working systems, is more important than comprehensive documentation. However, working software over comprehensive documentation doesn't mean that we don't document. In fact, you get better, more timely documentation because of the way that Agile documents. They document as things are developed, or they do so with prototypes. So as a result, you end up with better documentation, not rush at the end documentation when no one can remember what they did, or upfront documentation, which is OBE by the time it's delivered. Then there's customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And again, contracts are important. They're a great way of managing risk. They're a great way of identifying responsibility. However, what's important and what will be the going concern is the value created between the two parties working together. So you want to collaborate with your business partners, be them the owners or your customers or whoever they are who are actually receiving the value. You want to collaborate. And then lastly, responding to change over following a plan. And then again, plans are important. There's more planning in Agile approaches than there is inside of predictive. In fact, it happens every 2 to 4 weeks. But responding to change and being willing to change that plan is essential to be Agile. So this is what they came together, and this has basically launched 1,000 ships in terms of changing the world to become more Agile and to rethink what it means to work together to get complex work done. So speaking of complex systems, let's talk about two projects performed by the Air Force, both using Agile, but decades apart. The first one is the P-80 Shooting Star. The P-80 Shooting Star was actually a project done by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works team, led by Kelly Johnson. And in 1943, they actually prototyped the first jet fighter ever in just 143 days. And they did it by having the team co-located, working together, responding to change, empowered to take and change the designs, and by having great communication through co-location. Now, Kelly Johnson's 14 principles of management likely influenced some of the work that's being done right now at Kessel Run, which is an ongoing program inside the Air Force. In fact, in 2016, their Jigsaw project, which essentially replaced hundreds of millions of dollars worth of software within about 2 months, today saves about $10 million per month in fuel savings by efficiently routing and refueling all of the planes that are being launched by the combined Air Force Operations Center out of Abu Dhabi. And now these two projects were done, like I said, over 70 years apart, but they both use Agile, and they both are achieving incredible return on investment by leveraging the principles of Agile that we just talked about. Okay, let's do a quick comparison of Agile and traditional and lean. So let's start with our iron triangle: scope, schedule, and budget. These are all different types of costs, and they all constrain the work that we do. Note that the combination of scope, schedule, and budget is not quality, it is total cost. Schedule, budget, and scope are all forms of cost to get something done, to achieve value. Now, in terms of your goals, Agile's goal is always speed, because speed is going to give you the best return on investment. When it comes to traditional, what we're going for is often predictability. We want to make sure that we are going to get what we ask for on time and on budget. And with lean, our goal is almost always innovation. We want someone to solve our problem. We want someone to figure out how to solve it for us. And so when we look at the triple cost constraint, oftentimes the way that we think about this is we're going to hold 2 constant and change 1. So with Agile, we're going to hold schedule and budget fixed. So you have a certain amount of money and you're going to have a certain amount of time, but then the question is, what can you get done within that time? And that's adjusting of scope. So that's time boxing. With traditional, you're going to hold scope and schedule constant, saying this is how much I want to get done and this is when I want it. And the question is, how much is it going to cost? So I know what I want, I know when I want it, give me the price. With lean, the question is, when can I get it? How quickly can I get it? When is the best time to deliver it? And that's based upon scope and budget. So you only have so much money, but you have a scope that you must accomplish. when is the best time to deliver that thing? And that may be based upon WIP limits or just-in-time delivery, that kind of thing. When it comes to how you pick the vendor that is going to be delivering for you, with Agile, if someone's going to be changing your scope, you want to source based on trust. That's how you pick your provider. In terms of traditional, if you know what you're going to get and you know when you're going to get it, the only thing you care about is that your provider be efficient. So you source based on efficiency. I'm looking for my lowest cost, technically acceptable delivery. And when it comes to lean, the goal is always to find someone with the expertise. Because they're trying to solve a problem for you, and because you need that problem to be solved within the budget that you have, you want that person to have the greatest expertise and to give it to you at that price and get it done. So now that you understand the high-level difference between Agile, traditional, and lean, let's talk a little bit about the sprint process. There are really three parts. The first part of the sprint process comes with planning. So you have a product owner who's been working on a backlog, essentially a list of features, stories, and bugs. And at the very beginning of a sprint, which is a 2 to 4 week period of time to get work done, the development team will look at that list and they're going to look at the top of that list because it's going to be prioritized. And they're going to pick what parts of that list can group together into a shippable piece of product or a shippable increment. And if they can do that, they're going to go ahead and put together what's called the sprint backlog. So they focus on what's needed to achieve a sprint goal, and they come up with a sprint backlog to be accomplished in that 2 to 4 week sprint. Then they move on to execution. And here during the execution, there is a daily stand-up or a daily scrum where the whole team gets together and talks about the work that they're doing today and what they're trying to accomplish, and they help each other understand what each other is doing so they can move faster. They also occasionally work with the product owner in order to refine the backlog so it's ready for the next sprint planning. And they may show and get immediate feedback either from the product owner or from stakeholders. And usually all of these different processes are being managed by the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is essentially your facilitator in chief, the person who is going to help get all the work done by tracking and enabling meetings to go efficiently and to ensure that performance is being accomplished, etc. They are essentially the guide and the facilitator. Once the sprint is completed, you're going to have what's called a potentially releasable increment. That potentially releasable increment is then going to be demonstrated in the sprint review to the product owner and any stakeholders who are interested in the progress. And that's going to be an opportunity to get real concrete feedback on working product or maybe a prototype. And then there's also going to be the sprint retrospective. And this is going to be a chance for the team to take a look at how well they did in the last sprint and then talk about what could they do better? How could they improve as a team? This is what really allows the team to learn and go faster. And they then start this process over again with planning immediately after the retro. And this is the reason why we say Agile is an anti-fragile or resilient framework, is because in Agile, you start off with planning, and then you go to doing, and then you check what you did, and then you act to change how you plan and how you execute. And so this plan, do, check, act improvement cycle means you can learn from every sprint and get faster and faster. So to sum up, we talked about the Agile Manifesto and how we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working systems over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and of course, responding to change over following a plan. And that really is the centerpiece of Agile. But the goal of Agile is speed. It is a 3-step process in order to get that resilient learning framework built into your program. And in the end, that resilience is what's going to lead to really high-performing teams, is the fact that they can go faster by learning and by having this communication. That built-in continuous improvement is going to make all the difference. And through learning and through experimentation, we're going to become an anti-fragile team. So hopefully this lesson has been clear to you and you've been able to get a little bit of a refresher on Agile if you didn't know it already. Or maybe you learned a thing or two about Agile you didn't know. In the next lesson, we're going to go back and talk about traditional and lean, and we're going to dive into the details there about how lean broke the iron triangle. Look forward to seeing you there.